The crisis finds Will Spencer on a Monday that looks ordinary until it isn't. A clipped audio file drops on a gossip site. A smeared video goes viral. A string of weaponized texts push a story no teenager can outrun. And in a single turn, the youngest Spencer becomes a headline instead of a person. He is accused of cruelty he didn't commit, of privilege weaponized against a classmate, of behavior stitched together by an enemy who knows exactly how the internet burns. By noon, sponsors are calling, classmates are weaponizing group chats, and the Spencer building fortress glass, steel, a skyline promises suddenly a target. Bill reads the first transcript with a face gone cold and then, without swagger or show, makes two calls that redraw the city. The first to Katie Logan, voice stripped of history, asking her to meet him in the lobby. The second to security with a single instruction: get my son off the grid and into my arms. She is done letting yesterday dictate today. She does not ask what Bill failed to do or who he angered this time. She asks where Will is and what he needs in the next hour, the next day, the next week. Bill is not the myth today, not Dollar Bill, not the empire builder. He is a father with a failing storm wall, and the one person he trusts with strategy has always been the woman who could read a room while men were still searching for chairs. They move together by instinct, old choreography that used to win them boardrooms and date night sex. At this time, the choreography is Triage. They turn Spencer Publications into a redoubt in under 4 hours, a living crisis plan with teeth. The rules go up on glass and email and Slack. No Spencer property will publish a line about Will. No Spencer camera will hunt Will's friends. No Spencer employee will launder rumor as sources say editors sign a revised ethics charter that includes a brand new firewall named after the boy in the middle of the fire. Legal locks down the chain of custody for every piece of content that mentions Will across the wider media ecosystem. Anything defamatory gets a letter before dinner. Security sweeps the building for bugs because the first leak almost always comes from someone paid to be the leak, and the corridors get a new kind of quiet. Bill assembles a private investigations cell with ex-FBI and a digital forensics lead who can fingerprint a deepfake frame by frame. Katie takes the flak jacket without theatrics. She walks into the newsroom and tells them Spencer will not be complicit in the public execution of a kid, even if that kid bears the name on the building. And any staffer who cannot separate a story from a feeding frenzy should resign now and save everyone the trouble. Nobody resigns. Everyone gets the message. Outside the glass, the story churns like a riptide. Inside, a family stops pretending they are anything else. Will is pale but unbroken. He hates the pity in strangers' eyes and the powerlessness that comes with being young in a world that mistakes volume for truth. Bill sits with him and promises two things without spin. He will fix what's fixable, and he will not lie about what isn't. Katie takes the other side of the sofa and lays out a plan in bullet points and breath. Therapy on their terms, a tutor to keep school from weaponizing attendance. A single point of contact for all friends so nothing goes misquoted. Daily walks without phones. A list of people allowed to reach him and a longer list of people who will never darken their door again. She gives Will the part the adults always forget to give children: agency. He will be briefed before press conferences. He will choose which messages to answer. He will get to say no. Bill does the part he has always done best when he remembers who he is without the headlines. He puts his body between his child and the world. He calls his enemies and makes them talk in rooms instead of feeds. He does not threaten. He places facts in front of men who have gotten rich pretending facts are optional. He tells his own CFO to assume a bad quarter because doing right will always look expensive at first. He calls Justin Barber old ally and old wound and hires him on a leash and a contract that defines redemption as consistent service, not a single grand gesture. He brings Liam in for the conversations only a Spencer can have with a Spencer: what strength looks like when it is quiet, how it feels to be misread by a city that has never bothered to know you. The obligation to never offload your pain onto someone smaller. Katie reaches across years and brings Brooke into the inner circle for one purpose only: to keep the Logan side from spiraling the narrative into personalities and tabloid feuds. Brooke listens, nods, and promises not to turn a mother's anger into a morning show segment. The first presser happens 2 days in. The podium is Spencer Steele. The backdrop is not a logo wall but a statement of values that reads less like PR and more like a preamble. Bill and Katie step out side by side and do something rarer than a denial. They acknowledge Will is hurting. The allegations are under forensic review, and the company will not litigate a minor's life in public. They announced the creation of an internal ombudsman partnership with an outside ethics board to audit Spencer coverage of youth and trauma. They pledge funding for a citywide digital literacy initiative so the next kid targeted by a cut clip or a planted lie doesn't stand alone. They take exactly 3 questions and end the conference when the 4th turns into a fishing expedition. The press grumbles and then prints what it was given because the ground has shifted and the old tricks won't stick. In the days that follow, the forensic team strips the lies of their glamour. The audio cut splices from 2 separate nights. The video overlays a borrowed body and a doctored voice print. The texts drop in a comma style that doesn't match Will's. The metadata trails back to a private equity rival who decided that humiliating a teenager would teach Bill a lesson about staying in his lane. Lawsuits stack like dominoes with the patience of people who know the calendar is their friend. Subpoenas follow. A perp walk never happens because moneyed men settle before juries can see their faces, but the city learns the shape of the truth anyway. Through it all, Bill and Katie rediscover the version of themselves that worked. They split the load in ways that honor their edges. He handles the calls that require a bared throat and a promise to go nuclear if pushed. She handles the rooms where nuance saves lives, teachers, therapists, parents of kids who text Will through the night. They send a message by refusing to send any messages that are not about Will's safety and dignity. They stop each other when either of them starts to slide into the old habit of turning crisis into theater. They share takeout and case files and a couch when the alarms dim. They remember the differences that once ate them alive and name them one by one so the old shadows have nowhere left to sit. The city notices. The gossip turns. The narrative breaks. People who had written think pieces about entitlement find themselves writing follow-ups about how far they were willing to go to believe the worst about a boy they'd never met. On the 20th day, Will circles afterward as the first day he believed the ground was holding. Bill walks into his office and finds a simple list on his desk in Katie's handwriting. It is not a love letter. It is not a threat. It is a framework. Boundaries she will not bend if their renewed alliance is going to outlast the fire. Therapy, both of them, not as optics, but as weekly practice with a licensed witness who knows the difference between confession and bragging. No triangulating her again using a third party to deliver a truth too fragile to carry yourself. A complete stop to flirtations dressed up as charm in workplaces where people cannot say no without losing rent. If he likes being irresistible, he can go be irresistible alone. A transparent co-parenting calendar that cannot be gamed by grand gestures or guilt. A code at the company that she can enforce even when it cramps a deal, including a clause that any executive who uses Spencer Air to pump their personal life will be benched without drama. A prenup that folds in a fidelity provision not as punishment, but as architecture. Distributing risk the way adults do when they've learned it, promises without paperwork are wishes with better lighting. And one final line, the only one written like a dare. If you propose, do it because you have practiced husbandry for a year, not because fear made you sentimental. Bill reads it once and feels the old defensiveness rise in his throat. Then he reads it again and recognizes the gift, a blueprint for staying. He signs the bottom with his initials, then takes a pen and initials beside every clause. He does not put on a show of contrition. He makes appointments. He fires to executives whose job descriptions had drifted into flattery and removes a consultant who keeps a private rumor file as leverage. He calls women he's hurt and apologizes without explanations attached. He stops using the word harmless to describe behavior that was harmless only to him. He picks a therapist who won't be charmed and keeps the appointment even on days when winning a fight would be easier. He gives Will space instead of advice when the boy asks to spend an afternoon without his shadow, then shows up on time when space has run its course. In the quiet that follows the worst of it, Katie sees the difference between posturing and practice. She doesn't market with fanfare. She keeps the boundaries visible. She slips and snaps at him once over an old bruise and then apologizes for bringing yesterday into today without warning. He takes the hit and nods because you cannot ask for forgiveness and control the angle at which it lands. The company changes along with them. Spencer Publications quits being a megaphone in love with its own echo and learns to be a fortification again, not against truth but against the ugly ease of destroying a human being for clicks. The newsroom's ethics charter becomes a recruiting tool. Interns start quoting it the way they once quoted subscriber metrics. The Ombuds publishes a monthly column that occasionally criticizes the boss, and the boss tells marketing to boost it. The investigative unit, born to defend Will, turns into a standing desk that traces digital manipulation campaigns across the city and hands their reporting to outlets that need it more than Spencer needs credit. The brand loses a few advertisers who preferred the old chaos. It gains others who are building for a world that might still be livable. Will heals in fits and starts. He hates mornings for a while and then starts running before sunrise. He writes a letter to the classmate whose name was dragged into his story and says, without PR polish, that he is sorry she was used to hurt him and sorrier still that the hurt found her too. He starts a podcast with two friends that never mentions what happened and somehow answers it anyway by making space for complicated conversations teenagers never get to have. Without adults peering in, he asks his dad if he can intern at a place that isn't Spencer. Bill says yes before the question finished and surprises himself by meaning it. The city begins to wonder if a Spencer 2.0 is possible without the rough edges that once cut everyone who cared. The answer arrives not as a stunt but as a season. At a charity gala that exists to raise funds for a digital forensics lab in public schools, Bill and Katie step onto a stage together. Will introduces them, voice steady, eyes bright. The applause is warm but not the point. They talk policy, not romance. They talk about what parents owe children in a world where video lies convincingly and shame is monetized. They announce a partnership between Spencer and a rival paper to share best practices on youth coverage, an olive branch no one saw coming, and an admission that a fortress is only ethical when it protects more than the family who built it. Afterward, in a quiet corner, Bill holds Katie's hand out of sight and says the one sentence he has rehearsed 1,000 times and learned to deliver with the humility of a man who finally understands the math of trust. I want to marry you when you're ready. Katie doesn't melt. She doesn't run. She gives him the only answer that fits the road they are on. Then keep doing what you're doing. And in a year, if the work still outweighs the words, ask me again. It is not a cliffhanger. It is a contract. The city takes the hint and treats their boundary as the story. The blogosphere wants a ring shot. Spencer gives them a policy update. The tabloids want an argument with Brooke. Katie invites Brooke to brunch with Will and a photographer sees nothing that sells. Ridge mutters about Beale's new sainthood and then admits, in a rare moment side stage, that any man who can put his kid before his appetite deserves at least one ironic toast. Brooke lifts a glass because she will always be a Logan and the Logans know how to stand in doorways between disaster and dinner and make both feel like home. A year is a long time in this town and short in a life. Bill keeps appointments. He declines temptations he used to call harmless and now calls disrespect. He learns what it looks like to love Katie without trying to earn applause for doing the baseline work. He takes Will to away games and sits high in the stands so the boy can look into the crowd and see a father, not a story. He loses one deal because the new ethics policy won't let him bury a source. He sleeps fine. He wins another that pays for the lab equipment in 3 districts. He proposes exactly once at the end of the year. No parade, no drone shot, just the 3 of them at home and a question asked like a promise. Not that life will be easy. Not that he will never make mistakes, but that he will make them slowly and fix them fast. That he will put family before myth and accountability before adrenaline. Katie says yes with a nod that feels like the best kind of headline needle because the work earned it. Shocking because the city had stopped believing two people could outgrow their patterns. They decide on a Spencer Logan wedding 2.0 that doesn't pretend the first time didn't happen. It will not be a spectacle. It will not be a press buy. It will be a vast ceremony with a logbook where guests can write the truth instead of platitudes, and a reception where we'll make the only toast that matters. We are here because we learned to be on the same team. If the date slides because a case explodes or a kid needs a parent in the dark at 2 a.m., no one will panic. The foundation holds regardless of calendar. The fortress that protected will stays up, not to hide mistakes, but to filter noise. Spencer Publications becomes the rare palace that knows its walls aren't there to keep people out but to keep values in. And should the city ask if this calm will last, the family shrugs and answers honest. Life is weather. We built better roofs. A crisis tried to turn a boy into a cautionary tale. Instead, it turned a father and a mother into partners again, not out of nostalgia, but out of choice. And it turned a company famous for feeding fires into a place that knows how to carry water. A wedding. Yeshua and the work and the love agree. Until then, Bill faces the past he once outran. Katie draws lines steel bright and keeps them, and Will, no longer the headline, gets to be exactly what he was before all this began. A kid with a future that belongs to him. Chat.